Hey y'all, it's me again. I'm gonna continue reading from my book, The 1900s. Let's go! A difficult test for Taft. Which group the new prejudice stand with would be in the popular mind a test of Taft's fidelity to Roosevelt and Roosevelt's policies. Partly a misleading test, for Roosevelt had not really stood with the insurgents. Rather, he had used this group as one element of the power which he forged from many forces. Nor had Roosevelt ever completely flouted or directly and permanently opposed the conservative East. Them too Roosevelt used as one of the materials out of which he fused his power. But the legislation Roosevelt had brought about was largely in such a direction. His attitude toward public questions was mainly that of the West. The mainspring of his popularity came from that section. Now the West would instinctively view Taft in the light of whether he stood with them and their representatives in Congress, whether in his official attitudes as well as his informal intimacies he was seen to associate most with the insurgents in Congress or with the orthodox stand-patters who held the official places of power and were a large majority of the party. To Taft it would be a difficult test, for Taft lacked Roosevelt's vigor, which kept both functions subordinate to his own leadership, lacked Roosevelt's diversity of temperament, which used to encourage stand-patters and insurgents alternately, as each group lent itself to Roosevelt's larger purpose of the moment. Taft lacked Roosevelt's geniality, coupled with dominating vitality, which could alternately flout stand-patter or conservative, and then immediately and cheerfully lift the victim to his feet and carry him along in Roosevelt's forward surge. The variousness of temperament, the functionality of talent for dominance Taft lacked. Particularly did Taft lack the primitive energy which enabled Roosevelt always to ride the wave, lead the procession. Taft with his more phlegmatic temperament, his more legalistic mind would be prevalent and conspicuously on one side or the other. In Taft's case, the outcome of the test would make him seem all black or all white. The static quality of Taft and his inertia would bring about the little which he should finally bear would be less chosen by himself than fixed upon him by whichever side had the greater energy surrounding him, pressing upon him, leaning against him. The conservation controversy. Try saying that 4 times fast. This aggressiveness of Roosevelt in behalf of conservation, his assumption as a broad rule of practice that the president can and should do anything in the public interest as conceived by him, that the Constitution did not expressly forbid, gave rise to the atmosphere of angry controversy over conservation when Roosevelt was succeeded by Taft. Roosevelt's official spearhead in the fight had been James R. Garfield, who as Secretary of the Interior had authority over the public domain. For this reason, Roosevelt wished Taft to keep Garfield in the cabinet. Taft did not. From that, the rest followed. Taft appointed Richard A. Bollinger of Seattle, Washington. Taft may readily have thought that Bollinger was an adequate appointment for Bollinger had been, up to a few months before, a subordinate in Garfield's department, head of the General Land Office, and as such has seemed to be in sympathy with Garfield, Roosevelt, and conservation. Taft was loyal to conservation and would not consciously have appointed a Secretary of the Interior who would reverse the policy. To Roosevelt, intimate conservationist Gifford Pinchot and the ardent young zealots who had gravitated around him, the dropping of Garfield was complete justification for acute distrust. In this state of mind, hardly any successor who tapped my point could fail to be under suspicion. Pyongyang was not without the government that Roosevelt had been to his impulse. With Roosevelt out of touch in Africa, Pinchot became what Roosevelt described him, one who would expend his great energy in fighting the man who seemed to him not to be going far enough forward. Bollinger and Taft had been in office less than 6 months when Pinchot put his suspicion into action. Pyongyang subordinate and Bollinger's department, Louis R. Glavis, Pinchot gave a letter of introduction to Taft. Glavis, calling on Taft, charged that his superior Bollinger was improperly expediting transfer of 100,000 acres of government coal land in Alaska to a group of capitalists composed mainly of the Guggenheim family, on claims which Glavis charged were in part invalid. Taft sent the charges to Bollinger. Bollinger delivered to Taft a defense and explanation. With butt-stretching documents, it contained upward of 500,000 words. Taft addressed to Bollinger a ponderous, sweeping letter of exploitation and endorsement intended to be a permanent seal of sanctity to refute all present charges against Bollinger and make future ones impossible. Taft told Bollinger that he had examined the whole record most carefully and that he had reached a very definite conclusion. Taft's conclusion was that the case attempted to be made by Glavis is, without any substantial evidence to stay intact, and embraces only treasure suspicion. This phrase, catching the public fancy, became conspicuous in the subsequent commotion. Taft authorized Bollinger to dismiss L.R. Glavis from the service of the government for filing a distinguished statement unjustly impeaching the integrity of his superior office. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And ring that bell notification if you're on YouTube. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please pay for something on my eBay and or my card. If you need my information for that, please comment down below. Bye.